Okay, today we're going to learn Eruvin Daf. I am this week's shiurim are sponsored by Rabbi Freda Cohen in honor of her grandchildren, Violet Noah and Remy Mayer, and their great-grandmother, Bubby Paula Cohen, on the occasion of her 88th birthday. Happy birthday. Yom Holedet Sameach. And today's shiur is dedicated by Gary Zeitlin in honor of the 5th Yurtzeit of Susan Zeitlin, Zichronah Livracha, a kanai for her family and for Yiddishkeit. And by Oren and Rachel Seliger in memory of Rivka Esther Batsara Gittel and Yeshaya Halevi Zichronah Livracha on her 10th Yurtzeit. She was always engaged in learning and went to weekly shiurim. She would be proud of her children learning Daf Yomi. Okay, if you remember, we started, it's a little bit of a confusing daf, and I'll give you the structure, certainly of the beginning part of the daf until we get to the end of Ayin Amud Aleph, so that you kind of get perspective. We're continuing on with all the details in the Mishnah. We started the Mishnah about details of bitul reshut, of relinquishing one's rights, one to many, many to one, two to many, many to two. Can this be done? How can it be done? We're going to go through what's the unique, what are they teaching in each of these cases. Then we're going to move on to a question. The Rabbah asks Abai about the basic question. Do you have to be mevatel reshut to everybody, relinquish your rights and say to everyone, I'm relinquishing my rights to you? Or is it enough to just say it in general, okay, to one person, and then they're kind of representative of everyone else? To that, Rabbah is going to answer everyone. To that, Abai is going to bring a braita that's very similar to our Mishnah, but a little different, very similar with all these cases, and try to prove from one of them that it looks like you don't have to cancel to everyone, and each one's going to explain it differently. And then the Gemara is going to go in depth into each of those cases of the braita, the way they did it in our Mishnah. Why are you telling us this? Isn't it obvious? What are we learning from there? And that's basically the structure of the page, of the first section of the page. So that should help you get some perspective. If you get a little bit lost in the details, don't worry. Okay, we need, again, try sometimes if the daf is a little dizzying to just get perspective of the daf in general, even if you don't get all the ins and outs. Okay, but I'll try to make it clear enough so that you can get all the ins and outs. So we're going to start at the bottom, 2 lines from the bottom of Samach Tet Amud Bet. We're going to start, just one second. Echad notain reshut. Okay, we had in the Mishnah, it basically said that we had Anshe Chatzer sheshachach echad mehem. We have people in the courtyard, one of them forgot, lo irev. So then we talked about what they can do. Remember, he can relinquish his rights to everybody else, and then it's a matter of who can carry from what house, etc. Then, if they gave their reshut to him, then he's allowed, but they're not anymore. Then it said if there were shnayim, if there were 2 people, that they relinquished their rights to 2 people, that doesn't work because remember, they each can't carry. If they didn't do the Eruvin and everyone relinquished their rights to those 2 people can't carry between each other, so the relinquishment of rights doesn't work. That all we got. But then there's this line that seems totally unnecessary. She'echad, now again, the Mishnah maybe is giving you a general principle, but anytime, and we're going to see this more than once today, anytime the Mishnah gives you a general principle, we're going to assume they must be teaching you something new. They wouldn't just repeat what was said. So it had this line, She'echad notain reshut v'notel reshut. One can both acquire rights and, notain reshut means he can relinquish rights. He can give his rights up. And notel reshut, and he can gain the rights. And shnayim notnim reshut ve'ein notlim reshut. But it doesn't work in both ways with the 2 people. 2 people, if it's me and you, we can relinquish our rights to everybody else in the courtyard, but they can't relinquish their rights to us if we didn't join the Eruv because we're forbidden. Now that's just a review of what we already said. So the Gemara is going to try to figure out, why did it say all this? So starting from Echad notain reshut, hatu lamali. Why do you need to say that one can relinquish rights to all the others? We already know that. Inotain tanina, inotel tanina. If you want to say it's to teach you one can relinquish their rights to everyone else, we already learned that. And if you want to say one can gain rights, everyone else can relinquish rights to them, then also we already learned that in the Mishnah. So basically all this was learned in the Mishnah. What do we need it for? What do we need this line for? So they say, it's really, we need it for the Seifa. Seifa eats Terichale. They wanted to compare 1 to 2. Now, even that we already kind of did. So again, it's a little bit strange. We'll get to that in a minute. But it's Terichale, they wanted you to know that Shnayim notnim reshut, that even 2 can relinquish rights to many. So they say, Hanami Pshita, but that's also obvious. That was already said in the Mishnah. So they're going to say, well, even though it was said in the Mishnah, because it's not so obvious, because you could have thought maybe not, that's why they tell you specifically. Ma'u detema ligzor dilma ati lebitule lehu ka mashmalan. you might have thought that there's a reason not to allow two people. Let's say it's me and you who are in this courtyard. We didn't join the Eruv. Everybody else is part of the Eruv. Maybe we wouldn't allow the two of us to relinquish our rights to everybody else because the reverse can't happen, because you can't all relinquish your rights to us. And therefore, right, all the other people can't relinquish their rights to us. Therefore, maybe it's going to be forbidden for us to relinquish our rights to them. And that's why this extra line came to teach you, even though you really learned it. It's not a great answer because they already said that in the previous line, but they want to say, don't think this is forbidden because that is forbidden, okay? And that's why Shnayim goes in two directions. And it's different in each direction. We can relinquish, but one can't relinquish their rights to us. So now they say, well, ein notzelim reshut. The fact that everyone can't relinquish their rights to two people. Lamali, again, why do we need this? Because it already said so in the Mishnah. They came to teach you here that even if they were to say, if let's say the people in the courtyard who did in Eruv and we didn't, say to me, listen, Michelle, we want to relinquish our rights to you. You can acquire, they even say stronger than just bitul. You can acquire our rights in order to give them over to you. Okay, I can give them over to you because you also didn't join. And there, in fact, you be the only one who'd be in charge, and therefore it would actually be okay. But no, this doesn't work. They don't have the rights to basically give me, right? We're tying on Shabbat, first of all, so they can't do a real kinyan. Even if they use the language of a kinyan, of acquiring, it doesn't work. Okay, because again, they can only give me rights if at the moment they give me the rights, I can carry. And I can't carry because I'm not together with you yet. So therefore, it doesn't work. So basically what they're saying is the echad noten v'notel is coming to teach you really that shnayim notnim be'en notlin. And that's because each of these cases, you might have thought there was a reason either to not allow the one that was allowed or allow the one that wasn't allowed. And therefore it says this. Now we get to our question that I told you Abai is going to ask Rabba. Ba'ai minei Abai mi Rabba. Chamisha sheshroyim b'chatzer achat. So our classic case, 5 are in a courtyard. Again, 5, just to review, is not a specific special number. It's just a random number. 5 that are in a chatzer, and one of them forgets, v'lo yirev, kashu mevatel l'shuto, tzarich levatel l'chol echad ve'echad, o lo. Abai asked, do you have to relinquish your rights to everybody, or is it enough just to one of them? And since one of them is part of the Eruv, you're basically saying we're all part of one and the same thing. Amar le tzarich levatel l'chol echad ve'echad. So Rabba says, you have to relinquish your rights to everybody. And again, here comes the complicated part, because in order to question him, Abai is going to bring a long braita with 7 cases. Okay, they're charted out on the sheet. First, to make it simpler on the sheet, I just brought the part of the braita that's the question and the answer given. But in the Gemara, we're going to read it in order. And here, the Gemara is going to first bring the entire braita before they get into where Abai's question is. Eitive. Echad, so here comes the braita 7 cases. Echad shelo irev, notem reshuto leechad sheirev. If one person didn't join the Eruv, he can relinquish his rights to one person who did do the Eruv. Now, what does this sound like? To one out of many. Why does it sound like one out of many? Well, if it says to one who did an Eruv, who did the person do an Eruv with if there weren't other people? So comes Abai and he says, look, one can relinquish one's rights to one that did an Eruv with other people. So that would imply he doesn't need, or she doesn't need to relinquish their rights to everybody, just to one person. Okay, we'll get back to this. Second case, Shnayim she'irvu notnim reshutan le'echad shelo irev. 2 people who are part of the Eruv can relinquish their rights. This is a review from things we saw in the Mishnah. Can relinquish their rights to one who didn't join the Eruv. Okay, so we're going to see that also, right? Relinquishing of rights can go in both directions. It can be one to many. It can be many to one. Ushnai, and to the one who didn't join the Eruv. Ushnayim shelo irvu notnim reshutan l'shnayim she'irvu o le'echad shelo irev. This is case number 3 and 4. 2 people who didn't join the Eruv. Okay, let's say in this case nobody made an Eruv. Now you might have thought until now we've seen bitul reshut works only if there was an Eruv and somebody wasn't part of the Eruv, right? But what if we have nobody did an Eruv at all? Do we allow bitul reshut? Can we say the same 5 people or 3 people or whatever it is? Let's say there's 3 of us, because that's the case they're giving. 3 people in the courtyard. 2 of us can say, we'll relinquish our rights to one of you. And again, that will allow at least that one person to be able to carry items, let's say, why would I do this? Maybe I have items in my house I want to take out. Remember the hot water with the baby? So let's say, right, I don't need it for myself. I just need it to happen. So I'll say, oh, I'll relinquish my rights to you. And that way we can get some stuff out of my house, because then you become, responsible for everything. You become the one owner. So if we didn't do an Eruv, one, so let's see the two cases. Two people, shelo irvu, can give their reshut to she'irvu. This is actually a case I made a mistake. It's 4 people. So 2 people can, I just made a mistake. I combined the 2 cases. Okay, let's start with the third case here. Shnaim shelo irvu notnim reshutan l'shnaim she'irvu. This is a case where 2 people did the Eruv and 2 people didn't do the Eruv. So 2 people can relinquish their rights to 2 people that did the Eruv. Okay, that we know already. O le'echad shelo irev, or even, that's the case where there's 3. Or even a third person who didn't do the Eruv, meaning there's 3 of us and neither of us did an Eruv. I was really explaining the 4th case before. I got confused for a minute. Aval, those were the 4 cases where relinquishing of rights works. Now we're going to start talking about where they don't work. Aval lo echad she'irev noten b'shuto le'echad shelo irev. But one person who didn't join the Eruv, who did join the Eruv, can't give his reshut to one person who didn't join the Eruv. Okay, meaning you have to assume there's 3 people here, and 2 did the Eruv, 1 didn't. Okay, let's say one of you did the Eruv, the other one didn't. Okay, Ruth joined the Eruv and Marcia did not. So now, let me say it better. Ruth and Marcia were part of the Eruv. I was not. Okay, Ruth is mevatel her reshut to me, but Marcia isn't. That obviously doesn't work, because then we're not all one unit. So that doesn't work. Next case. I lost my place for 1 second. Olechat shelo irev. Ve'en shnayim she'irvu notnim reshutan l'shnayim shelo irvu. Okay, and likewise, if 2 people did an Eruv, like Ruth and Marcia, they can relinquish their rights to me and Tamima, who basically were not part of the Eruv. So again, that's it, like we said before. 2 people can't relinquish their rights to 2 people who did not have an Eruv with each other. Ve'ein shnayim shelo irvu, last case, 2 people who didn't join the Eruv can't give their reshutan l'shnayim shelo irvu. Let's say none of us did an Eruv. That's what we saw before. The 2 can relinquish their rights to 1, but 2 can't relinquish their rights to 2, because that also, right, we know that already doesn't work. So katani miyad. Now we're going to go back to why we brought this source, Reisha. It says in the Reisha, echad shelo irev, right? It's always nice when the Gemara does that. They don't assume you remember it from the beginning of the Braita, so they remind you. Well, in any case, what does it say in this Braita? What's important for our purposes, at least our immediate purposes? Then there's going to be our less immediate purposes, which is going to understand every case of the Braita. But right now they're going to say, this is a biased question on Rabbah. It says, echad shelo irev, noten b'shuto le'echad she'irev. Now, hechidami, what could be the case? If you think it's just 2 people, well, ideleka achrina bahadei, and it's just the 2 of them, and then it wouldn't teach you anything about you have to be mevatal to everybody, because that one person is everybody. Well, bahadei man irev, who on earth did he make an Eruv with? It says 1 had done an Eruv. So the 1 had done an Eruv, it had to be he did an Eruv with somebody else. Elapshita diika achrina bahadei, it must be it's 2 other people who did the Eruv, 2 people who did the Eruv, and he was mevatel his reshut, or she was mevatel her reshut to one of those 2 people. So comes Abai and he says, Rabbah, can't be what you're saying is true. So Rabbah, what will Rabbah say? What's the case? Dahava umit. It must be the person died. Yes, 2 people did an Eruv, but one of them died. They're no longer here. And now there's only 1 person left. And that's why Rabbah thinks this works. So they basically each explain that it's a different situation. And that's how they each explain it according to their way of understanding. So now they say, Ida hava b'meit. So wait a minute. If you're going to say, now there's an assumption that there's a structure here of the Braita, and we have the list of cases that it works, the list of cases that it doesn't work, and the first case in each section must be parallel. So Ida hava b'meit, if he was there and he died, ema seifa, then the first case in the second section of the Braita doesn't make any sense. It says, Aval ein echad she'irev noten b'shuto le'echad shelo irev. One person who was part of the Eruv can't give his reshut to one person who wasn't part of the Eruv. Now, if we're assuming these cases are parallel, Ida hava umeit, if there were 3 people, 2 did an Eruv, 1 didn't, one of those people died, well, then it would work in the reverse, that the person who did the Eruv could relinquish his rights or her rights to the person who didn't do the Eruv. So amai lo, it should totally work. So therefore, it must not be, again, assuming the Resha he died, the Sefer would also be a case where he died. So therefore, Tosfot, Abaye says, Ela pshita deite, must be the person is there, the third person is there. And again, that proves Abaye that you only, again, in the first case, you only need to relinquish your rights to one of them. But now that, right, umi de seifa ite resha nami ita. So since the first, right, the seifa must be where the person was there, the resha must also be where the third person is there. Okay, they're assuming if case number 1 in section number 2 of the Braita, where we start saying all the cases don't work, is 3 people, and we're talking about 2 of those 3 people. The first case also must be 3 people, and we're talking about 2 of those people, and comes about it again, prove his case. So what will Rabbah say? Midi iria hakadita vakadita. Why are you assuming case 1 in each section is parallel? No, you can say the first case is when the person died, and the second, right, the first case in the second section is when the person's there. You don't need to necessarily say that they're the same case. And in fact, Rabbah proves from another case in the Braita that it's clear that you have to be mevatel, you relinquish your rights to everybody. How so? Okay, everybody whose rights need to be relinquished to. Teda, the katane seifa deresha. The second part, the later part of the first section says, Ushnayim shelo irvu. Okay, if me and you did not join the Eruv, what can we do? Notnim reshutan lishnayim she'irvu. We can relinquish our rights to 2 people who did do the Eruv. Now, what do you see from here? Rabbah says, it sounds like we each have to relinquish our rights to both of the other people. Lishnayim in le'echad lo. Otherwise, it would have said to echad mehem. So therefore, comes Rabbah and he says, from there you see, you actually have to relinquish your rights to both of the people. So what do we say? What's Abaye going to answer? Abaye Amar, my le'echad, my lishnayim, le'echad mishnayim. When it says to the 2 that irvu, we have to relinquish our rights to them. What he means is to one of them. Okay, it doesn't mean actually to both of them, right? There's a way of saying to the 2 who, right, who were part of the Eruv. It means to them. How do you do it? To one of them. Okay, that's how Abaye reads it. So the Gemara says that's not a good reading. Ihachi, if that's really the case, it was really only to one of the 2. What should the Braita have said? Litne le'echad she'irev. It should have said to one person, one of the people who did the Eruv, or le'echad shelo irev, or in the reverse case, to one who didn't do the Eruv. So kasha. Okay, so therefore this is difficult. Next case of the, okay, so basically we end there with a bit of a question against Abaye's reading. So Rabbah basically took this question of Abaye and he flipped it on its head because he said, I can explain your question against me by saying the guy was just dead and therefore, right, and remember, he died on Shabbat. And, you know, and I can even further prove my point from a different line in the Braita. Okay, now we're going to go through all these cases from the start, even the one we just explained. We're going to go through and explain, number 1, what's unique about each one, and also the ones that Abaye and Rabbah are going to understand to read differently. How do they each read this line? So we're going to start with the first one, which we already know. Echad shelo irev notem reshuto le'echad she'irev. Right, one can relinquish their rights to the other who didn't do the Eruv. I'm sorry, the one who didn't do the Eruv can relinquish their rights to the one who did the Eruv. L'Abaye de'ite. According to Abaye, it's that the third one is there, and he only needs to relinquish his rights to one of them. And that's where you learn that halacha from. And l'Rabbah dahava umit. According to Rabbah, the third person was there in the beginning, did the Eruv with one of the other people, and then that person died, and now there are only 2 left, and that's why one relinquishes their rights to the other. But it's not coming to teach you anything about how many, right? It really, you still need to relinquish your rights to everybody. Now, what's the chiddush here? Why is it a unique law here? Why do they need to tell you this? If one is relinquishing their rights to the only other person in the courtyard, it's obvious you can do that. Below gazra zimnin deite. You might have thought in this case, since it started off as 3 people, and theoretically, if, let's say, I wasn't part of the Eruv, I had to relinquish my rights to all of you. But now everyone, right, there's only one person left because everyone died or one person died or whatever it might be. At that point, you might have thought, maybe we don't allow me to relinquish my rights because before Shabbat, there were other people here. And somebody might learn that, oh, looks like you don't have to relinquish your rights to everybody because actually there's other people part of the Eruv, even though they're not really here anymore. So you might have thought maybe there's a reason to make a gzera in this case and to forbid it. No, there's no reason. And that's what it taught you here. Okay, next case. Remember, bitul reshut works in both ways. We can relinquish our rights to a person who didn't join, the one person who didn't join the Eruv. So pshita, this is obvious. In other words, what's the difference whether I relinquish my rights to all of you or you all relinquish your rights to me? Either way, it works. So what's the unique halacha here? Ma'u detema kevan delo irev liknese kamash malan. This is a very interesting logic. You might have thought, I am at fault because I didn't join the Eruv. Now, if you all relinquish your rights to me, I end up being the only one who can really carry here. So maybe we shouldn't allow this because I should be penalized because I didn't join the Eruv. So maybe we don't allow relinquishing of rights in that way, not because it's not effective. It is effective. It's just we should penalize the person who didn't join the Eruv. So you might have thought that would be the case. Kamash malan, that's what this line comes to teach you. It's not the case. We don't penalize me. Ushnaim shelo irvu, next case number 3. Notnim reshutam l'shnaim she'irvu. 2 who didn't join the Eruv, right? There's 4 of us in the courtyard. 2 of us didn't join, me and you, and there's everybody else who did join. So we can relinquish our rights to everyone else who did join. So l'Rabba, what's the point of Rabba? What does Rabba learn from this? This was his whole proof. The whole point of this line is Tana Sefer l'galui reisha. This was to teach you that really you have to be mevatel to everybody because it's telling you 2 of us have to relinquish our rights to the other 2 people who are living in the courtyard. We have to go individually to each one. L'Abaye, who doesn't think that that's the law, won't be able to derive that from here. What will he say? Shnaim shelo irvu itzri chale. You need this case of 2 people who didn't join the Eruv. That relinquishing your rights doesn't only work for one person, it also works for 2 people. Why? This is where we started today. We said that when it comes to one person, I can relinquish my rights to all of you, and you can relinquish your rights, all of you can relinquish your rights to me. When it comes to 2 people, we can relinquish our rights to you, but you can't relinquish your rights to us. If that's the case, you might have thought maybe the rabbis would come and say, since it doesn't work in both directions, let's forbid it in the direction that it does work and not allow 2 people to relinquish their rights. So, kamash malan, that's why it comes to teach you, no, you actually can. Now, what about this case? If none of us did the Eruv, this was the case, 3 people, none of us did an Eruv, 2 can relinquish their rights to 1. Why? Maybe relinquishing of rights, as we thought from the beginning, might only work when there's an actual Eruv. And then to kind of fix the Eruv, we allow the 1 person who didn't join or the 2 people who didn't join to relinquish. But when nobody did an Eruv, maybe not. Again, liknisinu. We keep seeing this idea that maybe we want to penalize people because really, what are you doing not joining the Eruv? In fact, right, one can ask a question on this whole topic. Why wouldn't somebody join an Eruv? And why aren't we penalizing them? It's unfair. They're being very selfish, right? They're not allowing other people to do things. So maybe we would penalize them. Not only that, there's more of a reason to penalize because if we allow them to do bitul reshut, then maybe they'll always do bitul reshut and they'll forget about Eruv in general. So kamash malan, that there's no issue here. We don't worry about that. Now, why don't we worry that they're going to forget Eruv? So the Ritva says something that's very obvious, which is when there's bitul reshut, what happens? We already learned in the Mishnah. There's a lot of limitations on who can carry and where they can carry. And it's not like Eruv where it's a free-for-all and you can carry everywhere. So because of that, they're not going to forget Eruv because it's very detail-oriented and it's very it's very limiting. You can't all just freely carry. So it's not like they're going to forget. They probably just forgot to do the Eruv this week, right? How many times do we get to Shabbat and we remember all the things we forgot to take care of before Shabbat? So they forgot. And that's why, by the way, right, in Bameh Madlikin, in the second parak of Shabbat, it says, right, the questions you ask before Shabbat, Isartem, did you take your Truma Namaser? Eravtem, did you do your Eruv? So the people don't forget, right? So that's, now you can see. Okay, aval ein echad she'irev. Now we're starting with the second slew of cases, the second section, case number 4. Ein echad she'irev noten reshuto le'echad shelo irev. So what's this case coming to? Remember we said the case has to be there's 3 people, and 1 can't relinquish their rights to one of the people who's part of the Eruv. No. Ein echad she'irev noten reshuto le'echad shelo irev. The reverse. 1 who's part of the Eruv can't relinquish one's rights to one who's not part of the Eruv. Okay, echad she'irev, because there's three people, and that's why wouldn't it work? If it's just two of them, obviously one can relinquish their rights to the other. So it must be three people, and it's teaching you that if two joined the Eruv and one didn't, if one who joined the Eruv relinquishes their rights to the one who didn't, that doesn't resolve anything, which is kind of obvious. So, la'abaye, tani sefer l'galui resha. This case is obvious, but why did they bring it? To teach you this case is three people. Therefore, it's trying to teach you that the resha is also three people. And that was Rabbi's whole proof that you don't need to cancel to everybody. So that's the only point for it here. And l'rabba, I did tani resha, tani nami sefa. Since it said this case in the beginning, they say this case now. In other words, it's just kind of a filler, like to just compare case, since we had a case like that, we're giving a case in the reverse. Okay, next case. Two people who joined an Eruv can't relinquish their rights to two people who didn't join the Eruv. That we've already learned. So now they're going to ask the same question they asked on this line in the Mishnah. Hatu lamali, what do you need this for? As obviously, if the two people can't carry between each other, of course this isn't going to be allowed. So what's it coming to teach you? Even if, we saw this already, when they relinquished their rights to one of them, they said, right, even if they relinquish their rights to the two of us, and then I relinquish my rights to you, it still doesn't work. Even though in the end we end up with only one owner, the problem is that what? Right? You might have thought this works. They can relinquish their rights to both of us, and then I can relinquish my rights to you, and you're the sole owner. But since when they relinquished rights, there was it couldn't work. So relinquishing of rights only works if the results are immediate. In other words, if the act they did resolves it entirely, great. But if it needs another act after that, the relinquishing doesn't work. It's almost like there's a leniency here, but we're not going to be lenient and then more lenient, right? It has to just work in order. It's already strange that we're allowing you to do this. So we're going to only allow it when it actually functions properly. What about this next case? Okay, so this is if two people who are part of the Eruv can't relinquish their rights to two people who aren't part of the Eruv. Obviously, two people who didn't, if there's four of us and we didn't do an Eruv at all, two of us can't relinquish our rights to two of us. So why is it telling you that? So, hatu lamali. Lot tzricha da amre knei amanat lahaknot. And this is what we said at the beginning of the page. If they use the words of acquiring and they say, listen, we're relinquishing to you, Michelle, you acquire our rights in order for you to then give all of our rights to the fourth person. No, that doesn't work either. Okay, even if they use the lashon of kinyan, which is very strong lashon, doesn't work. But because the whole thing of bitul reshut doesn't work by acquiring. It's not a real acquiring, right? It's this unique thing. Okay, so finish. We close that sugya. Again, how did we get here? We started with finishing up the case of the Mishnah, explaining what the unique, why all these cases were mentioned in the Mishnah, all these lines. Then we went off into this question: do you have to be mevatel to everybody? Rabbi said yes. Abai didn't think so. Abai brings this Breita to question Rabbi. Each one explains the Breita in their own way, and then the Gemara basically went through all the cases of the Breita to say what's unique about each case and what's each case teaching us. Now we have a different question. Rabbi asked Rav Nachman, Yoresh maushi vatel reshut. Let's say I inherit property in a courtyard. Okay. Now, what was the case? And now I inherit it on Shabbat. Okay, the person who gives me the whatever land it is that I inherit it on Shabbat. So, what's the question? Can I relinquish my rights to this new property that I just gained on Shabbat? Do we say, now what's the assumption? The assumption is the person who was on their deathbed didn't join the Eruv for whatever reason, okay? So they didn't join the Eruv. Now, they die on Shabbat, I inherit the property. At this point, what happens? Can I relinquish rights? Because I'm now the owner. But what's the issue? Well, I wasn't an owner when Shabbat started. And we know that there's all these issues about Shabbat that things have to kind of be set when Shabbat starts. Bein hashmasha, we've talked about that when it comes to muktzah and other issues. So we're going to ask the following question. Hecha, this is what Rava asks Rav Nachman. Hecha di ibayli Eruvin me'etmol. matzeh ma'ariv. When you could have potentially joined the Eruv yesterday before Shabbat started, then bitule nami matzeh mevatel. Then you can do relinquishing of rights. Aval hai kevandi ibai Eruvin me'etmo lo matzeh ma'ariv lo matzeh mevatel. But this person, the yoresh, the inheritor, since they didn't have the ability to do the Eruv, does bitul reshut work only for someone who could have joined the Eruv but didn't? That's what we've been saying all along. Since you could have joined the Eruv but didn't, this person couldn't have joined the Eruv because they weren't the owner when Shabbat started. O Dilma yoresh kira'eh avuahu. Or maybe we say the yoresh is like the legs of one's father, okay, assuming it was the father that died. So the person who inherited is basically filling the shoes of the father, and therefore he can do bitul reshut in place of the father. So Amrle, it's an interesting way he answers. Ani omer mevatel, v'hane debei Shmuel tanu ein mevatel. Okay, basically brings two sides. He says, I think it's fine. The person who inherits can relinquish their rights, but you should know that in the house of Shmuel, they say you cannot. So now we're going to have a number of questions of Rav Nachman. Today we're going to see two. There's more tomorrow. Eitive. So here comes a question. Ze'aklal. Kol shemutar. Okay, first, this is going to be like the other one. First, we're going to read the whole Braita. The Gemara is going to explain the Braita. Okay, last time we read the whole Braita, they brought up the question, they answered it, and then they went to explain the whole Braita. Here we're going to do the reverse. We're going to bring the whole Braita. It's not going to be so clear yet what they mean. The Gemara is going to explain what the purpose of each line is, and I also charted it out for you on the sheet so you could see it a little more easily. So first we'll read the Braita. Ze'aklal. Now, the Ze'aklal is kind of a topic, a title. This is the general rule. They're now going to give two general rules, one that goes in one direction, one that goes in the other. And then they're going to basically say, what are each of these two cases? And then they're going to assume that the word Ze'aklal, you didn't have to say the word Ze'aklal. You could have had this Braita without the word Ze'aklal. If the word Ze'aklal appear, they must be coming to include something. And since Ze'aklal is the title, it applies to case one, to line one and line two. So in each case, we're going to say, what does Ze'aklal come to include in addition to what was already said in the Braita? So Ze'aklal, kol shemutar l'miksat Shabbat, hutar l'kol Shabbat. Whatever is permitted for part of Shabbat will allow it also for the entire Shabbat. Meaning this is like what we say, if it works by Nashmashot, it works for all of Shabbat. V'kol shene'asar l'miksat Shabbat, if something was forbidden when Shabbat started, ne'asar l'kol Shabbat. It's also forbidden for the rest of Shabbat. Chutz mi, what's the one unique exception? Mi mevatel reshut, me, one who relinquishes rights. Why? Because one who relinquishes rights does it on Shabbat. Remember, there was machloket Beit Shammai Beit Hillel, but assuming we go by Beit Hillel, you do it on Shabbat. And it was forbidden to you to carry when Shabbat came in, and yet we allow you to relinquish your rights on Shabbat. Okay, so we'll get back to this. So now the Gemara starts explaining each line. Kol shu hutar l'miksat Shabbat, mutar l'kol Shabbat. We're starting with the first line. What does it mean? Kigon irev derech hapetach v'nistam hapetach. Irev derech hachalon v'nistam chalon. If you remember, two courtyards, right? It doesn't have to be courtyards, it could be houses, anything zeliadze. They can make an Eruv as long as there's an access way between the two. We saw those two chatzerot that are next to each other, that is an opening in between. What if they made an Eruv? There was this opening between them. And on Shabbat, it got closed, okay? Somehow there was a door and the door got sealed, or there was a window and the window got filled in. And now there's no access. So what do we say? Since it was mutar when Shabbat came in, it's going to be mutar all of Shabbat, even though we don't have access. Theoretically, we do have access. We could throw it over the wall, right? We could still throw things over a wall, some, right? If there's this mechitza. So there is some sort of access, even if it's not regular access, and maybe access that would normally allow us to do an Eruv. But since we were able to do the Eruv from the beginning, and Shabbat already came in when this happened, it's okay. Now we have to do, that was what the line meant. Now we have to say, well, what is Ze'aklal coming to include? Ze'aklal la'tuye mavoy shenitlu korotavu l'chayav. This is very interesting. If you have a mavoy where your lechi or your korah that you use to fix it, remember that's your whole, it's either a heker, it's a noticeable reminder, or it actually functions as a wall to separate. Either which way you look at it, this was up and now it falls on Shabbat. If it falls on Shabbat, then it's still okay. Now this is more radical than the first, because the first is you still have your Eruv, it's just your access is blocked. Here, you don't even have your Eruv anymore, but we say, since you had an Eruv when Shabbat started, that's sufficient and you're allowed for the rest of Shabbat. Again, all this has nothing to do with the Yoresh. Okay, we're not going to get to that yet. Next, So if you're wondering where are we going with this, don't worry yet. We'll get to it. Next, second line of the Braita. If it's forbidden for part of Shabbat, it will be forbidden for all of Shabbat. Kigon, what's a good case? We saw this already. Shnei batim b'shnei tzidei reshut harabim. We each live on the opposite sides of a main thoroughfare, reshut harabim. V'kifum nochrim mechitza, and the nochrim came, non-Jews came on Shabbat, and they made a wall around our spaces. At this point, it's a reshut yachid, it's a private domain. However, by rabbinic law, we can't carry from one to the other. And because, right, we'd have to do an Eruv or something. And because from the beginning of Shabbat, there was reshut harabim going between us, even though now it's a reshut yachid, we don't treat it as a reshut yachid, and it's forbidden. Zeh haklal la tuye mai. What's the zeh haklal here coming to include? La tuye meit nochri b'Shabbat. Okay, it's a case where the nochri dies on Shabbat. Remember, the nochri forbids. If the nochri dies on Shabbat, we don't immediately allow the carrying because it was already forbidden for part of Shabbat, so we don't make it permitted for the rest of Shabbat. Now, what's the main point for our purposes of the Yoresh? Chutz v'katane chutz mi mevatel reshut. It sounds like the only time that you can do something that wasn't allowed before Shabbat, and now we're going to allow it, is someone who's mevatel reshut. Now, what does it seem to imply here? He could have done it before Shabbat, right? But he didn't. It was allowed for him before, right? And now, but it was forbidden to him. So what do we see? The mevatel reshut himself, right? He's the one who can do it. So it sounds like, again, this isn't the greatest inference. Iu in yoresh lo. It sounds like the mevatel reshut, the one who could have done it before Shabbat, and not someone who inherited. So the Gemara says, I don't know what you're talking about. That doesn't mean anything. Or Rav Nachman answers, no, I can read it as chutz mitorat bitul reshut. The topic of relinquishing rights is something that can be done, right? That even though one's forbidden, and this is the way really we read it in the first place. Once it's forbidden, right? You can't carry before Shabbat, but you can relinquish your rights on Shabbat. That's fine. This doesn't teach you anything about whether you inherited the rights on Shabbat or not. It has nothing to do with that. Second question, last one for today, but not the last one here. Okay, someone in a courtyard dies. Okay, so the first thing you have to know, we're talking about we all have a courtyard. Okay, someone dies. Okay, the case is, just one second. Just want to check one thing. He dies, and there's something he dies, and the case was, they don't tell you all the details. Right, he made an Eruv with the Bnei Chatzer. Okay, he was part of the Eruv. Then he died, and his reshut now belongs to someone who's in the shuk, okay? Someone who's not living here. So now the question becomes, if he died, mi ba'od yom, okay? Now, he joined the Eruv, but then he died. So now he's no longer the owner, and the person in the shuk didn't join the Eruv. So if that's the case, the Yoresh is Osel, okay? Because he forbids it, because he didn't join the Eruv now. He's the new owner before Shabbat. But if it was already Misha Chashecha, Eino Oser, and this matches what we saw before. Once the Eruv works, even if something changed, okay? Once it's Shabbat. But here's the second case. Echa min hashuk. Let's say you had a house in a courtyard. You didn't live there, okay? And you didn't join the Eruv. Now, if you remember, if someone doesn't live there, they usually don't forbid carrying there because they're not living there, okay? So this person has a house in the Chatzer that he doesn't live in, and then he dies. And he leaves one of the inheritors lives in the courtyard. This, by the way, makes sense. People often live with their families, right? You could see the reality there. So now, the person who lives in the courtyard was part of the Eruv. They all had an Eruv, and the Eruv worked fine because the one person who didn't join was far off. But now, the person who was part of the Eruv now became owner of a different property in the courtyard, and that property is not part of the Eruv. So now the question is, what happens? So mi ba'od yom, if the person died before Shabbat started, eino oser, then he'll just be part of the Eruv and it's fine. But if he died misha chashecha, oser, at this point, it's forbidden to everybody because even though the Yoresh is here, right, and it sounds like what? The Yoresh can't be mevatel his reshut, because obviously that would be the easiest solution. And here it says he forbids everyone because he just became owner and there's nothing he can do about it, it sounds like. So amai oser, mivatel. They say, why should he be oser? He could just do bitul reshut, relinquish his rights, very simply. So what did they answer? Oh, my oser nami dekatane, ad shivatel. Rav Nachman says, no, it means he's oser when the person dies on Shabbat, but he can relinquish his rights and then resolve the issue. So it doesn't disprove what Rav Nachman says, which is that a yoresh can do relinquishing of rights. Okay, we'll end here for today. We'll pick up with the next question tomorrow, and have a Shavua Tov, a Chodesh Tov to everybody.